All right, everyone, get ready for a deep dive. Today we're looking at Joan of Arc, and we're going beyond the usual story you hear.
Yes, exactly. We're going to be using these excerpts. I think they're probably from an encyclopedia.
Right, yeah. To uncover some really, fascinating details. Details that maybe you haven't heard before.
Absolutely.
Our goal is to understand Joan not just as, this historical figure, right? But as an actual person.
A real person.
Living in a really, really complex time.
And for that, we really need to understand what was going on in France in the 15th century.
Okay, so, set the scene for us.
Just imagine France, ravaged by the 100 Years' War, also dealing with the Black Death. And on top of that, conflicts among the nobility.
So, total chaos.
It was utter chaos. And this chaos, this instability, it's key to understanding how a young peasant girl like Joan could rise to power.
So it wasn't just some random thing.
No.
Her emergence was really tied to the circumstances of the time.
Exactly. And we can't forget about the War of Succession, the fight for the French throne. Joan's actions were right in the middle of all that.
Oh, wow. Talk about a pressure cooker.
Yes.
Can you explain a little bit more about, the War of Succession and how it impacted Joan?
Well, there were multiple people claiming the throne, creating uncertainty, division. Joan's decision to support Charles VII, the uncrowned king. This was a political act with major consequences.
It makes you realize, her actions weren't just happening in a vacuum. This was a real political landscape.
A very real, very complex political landscape. And this is where things get really interesting.
Yeah.
Because this is when Joan starts experiencing visions.
Visions.
Yeah. She claims guidance from Saints Michael, Margaret, and Catherine. Now remember, this was a time when religious fervor was high, and prophecies about a virgin saving France.
Really? People believed that?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. These prophecies were everywhere. Whether Joan consciously tapped into that, or it was unconscious, hard to say, but it gave her a platform.
Wow. So her visions weren't just a personal thing. They fit into the whole context of the time.
Exactly. It's important to remember that while today we might try to explain her visions through things like, epilepsy,
Right.
mental illness, we can't diagnose her from the past.
Yeah.
What's important is how strongly she believed in these visions.
Regardless of where they came from.
Exactly. Her belief is what drove her actions, shaped history.
It makes sense.
Yeah.
And it's that conviction that fueled her journey from an unknown peasant girl to a military leader.
And remember, she wasn't just a symbolic figurehead.
Right.
She provided tactical advice, real military strategy, and people listened to her.
Wow. Hold on. So she wasn't just waving a banner and inspiring.
I don't know. She was involved in the actual planning.
That is fascinating.
Okay.
Okay, but how did she even get to that point? I mean, she was determined to meet Charles VII, but she got rejected. Twice.
Twice. But she didn't give up.
She even traveled in disguise. That takes guts.
Absolutely. It shows incredible courage and resourcefulness.
And then she gets to Charles VII. And people, these hardened military commanders, they listen to her. A young, unproven girl.
It's a question that has puzzled many. What was it about Joan that made people listen?
Yeah, what was it about her? What did she have that made people just believe in her like that?
I think it was a few things. The sources say she had this aura about her, like charisma and authority. Even though she was so young and her timing was perfect, the French forces were desperate. They needed something to believe in.
And she gave them that.
She did. And then, of course, you have the Siege of Orleans,
Yeah.
a major turning point for both Joan and the whole war.
Okay, so tell us about that, the Siege of Orleans.
Well, English had been surrounding the city for months, and the French were about to lose.
Oh, wow.
Morale was low. The situation it seemed hopeless.
So Joan steps into this mess. What does she do? How does she change things?
It wasn't just her being there, just her presence. She was actually involved in the military decisions, the strategies.
No way. So she was actually coming up with plans.
The sources say she was a big part of planning the attack that broke the siege.
That's incredible. So not just a figurehead. She was a real strategist.
Yes. And she was brave. I mean, during the siege, she got hit by an arrow.
Oh, no.
But she kept fighting, leading the charge.
Talk about leading by example. Wow. What about the English? How did they react to Joan?
Well, they knew she was becoming powerful. They tried to discredit her, spread rumors, saying she was a witch or possessed by demons. But it didn't work.
Of course not. If anything, it made her seem more powerful.
Right. Her victories made it look like she really was divinely guided.
So the Siege of Orleans was a huge victory for the French. What happened next?
Joan knew that Charles VII needed to be officially crowned, to be seen as the rightful king. So they decided to have the coronation at Reims.
Reims? Why Reims?
Well, traditionally, that's where French kings were crowned.
Ah, so it was a symbolic choice.
Oh, yeah. It was a very smart move. It strengthened Charles's claim to the throne, made it look, well, official.
It was like a power move.
Exactly. But even though the coronation helped Charles, things started to change for Joan.
How so?
Well, her later military campaigns, not as successful. And some people at court, they started to turn against her.
Really? Why would they do that? She was the one who helped get them there.
Well, some people might have been jealous of her power. Maybe some didn't like how she did things, her methods.
Or like her strengths, her boldness, her conviction. Maybe they worked against her in the end.
It's possible. Plus, let's not forget, she was a young woman in a very patriarchal society.
Right. Challenging the way things were done.
Exactly. And then, of course, you have her capture at Compiègne.
Okay, so tell me about that. What happened?
Well, it wasn't a big battle, more like a small fight. Things went wrong, and during the retreat, she was captured by the Burgundians.
Burgundians. Weren't they on the French side?
They were allies of the English. Oh, wow. So she was betrayed by people who were supposed to be on her side.
Yeah. And what's even crazier is that Charles VII, the king she helped crown,
Yeah.
he didn't try to get her back.
What? Why not? I mean, she did so much for him.
It's a good question. Maybe he thought it would make him look weak.
Or maybe he saw it as a chance to get rid of her, since she was becoming so powerful.
It's hard to say. But her capture, it really marked the beginning of the end for Joan.
Yeah. She was handed over to the English, who saw her as, I don't know, like a trophy.
And a threat.
Right. So instead of battles, now it's a trial.
A trial for heresy.
But that wasn't the real reason, was it?
No. The English wanted to use the trial to discredit Charles, to say he wasn't the rightful king.
Joan was basically caught in the middle of their political game.
Exactly. They accused her of witchcraft, false prophecy, all to make Charles look bad.
So the trial was rigged from the beginning.
Oh, yeah. She was imprisoned, no lawyer, and they interrogated her constantly.
What a nightmare. How did she even handle all that? Even with all that pressure, Joan was smart. She fought back, used her words to show how ridiculous the accusations were.
I bet there's some good examples of that, like how she used her words.
Oh, there are. There's this one famous exchange about God's grace. They asked her if she believed she was in God's grace.
That's a tough question. Like a trap.
Exactly. But Joan, she said, if I am not, may God put me there. And if I am, may God so keep me.
Wow. That's clever. She didn't say yes or no.
She didn't. But she still showed her faith.
So smart.
Mm-hmm.
But in the end, they still convicted her. What was it that really sealed her fate?
Well, the whole trial was unfair. But one big thing they used against her was her clothes. She wore men's clothing.
I mean, we know that.
Mm-hmm.
But why was that such a big deal?
It was more than just, breaking social rules. It was seen as a challenge. Like she was rejecting the roles women were supposed to have.
So her clothes, which she said were for practical reasons and because of her mission from God.
They used it to say she was a heretic, a woman who didn't follow the rules.
Wow. So they used something she saw as part of her faith against her.
Exactly. And sadly, after months of this, Joan was condemned. And at only 19 years old, she was burned at the stake in Rouen.
That's just heartbreaking. Everything she did, to be killed like that, doesn't seem right.
No, it doesn't. But even though she died, her story didn't end there. Her legacy, it's continued. People are still inspired by her, even now.
Yeah, Joan of Arc. It's a story that really sticks with you. I know, it's like, even after all this time, Joan of Arc's story, it still fascinates people. Why do you think that is?
Well, it's a dramatic story, right? You have the peasant girl who becomes this military leader, the victory at Orleans, and then the betrayal, the trial. It's like full of twists and turns.
Yeah, it's a real epic.
Yeah.
But it's more than that, too. Joan of Arc's become this symbol for so many different causes.
Oh, absolutely. Monarchists, revolutionaries, nationalists, feminists, even some far-right groups, they all see something of themselves in her.
That's interesting. Why do you think her story, speaks to so many different people?
I think it's because Joan's life, it's full of these ambiguities, contradictions, a devout Catholic who challenged the church,
Right.
a young woman leading armies in a man's world, a peasant who rose to power but then was betrayed by the people she helped.
It's like her story. It's this blank canvas.
Yeah.
And people can see what they want to see in it.
But we can't forget, at the center of it all, she was a real person. with her own thoughts, her own feelings, making choices based on what she believed.
That's true. And some of those choices, they were really bold. I mean, how much do you think she understood about the politics around her?
That's the big question, isn't it? Was she aware of everything going on? Or was she truly following what she believed was a divine mission?
I mean, was she manipulating people? Or was she being used?
Historians have been debating this for centuries.
It seems like the more we learn, the more questions we have.
That's history for you. It's messy, it's complicated, we can never really know everything for sure.
But I think that's part of what makes it so interesting.
Absolutely. And Joan of Arc, her story, it makes us question things, dig deeper. It reminds us that even one person with strong convictions can change the world.
As we wrap up this deep dive then, what do you hope our listeners will take away from Joan of Arc's story?
I hope they come away with a sense of wonder, a desire to learn more, to keep exploring, and maybe even to question the stories we're told.
Yeah. Look closer at things, see the nuances.
Exactly, because the past, it's still shaping our world today.
Well, it's been a fascinating journey exploring the life of Joan of Arc, the woman, the myth, the legend.
And remember, the exploration doesn't have to end here. There's always more to learn, more to discover about Joan of Arc and about history itself.
Thanks for listening, everyone, and we'll see you on our next deep dive.